Okay, good afternoon. Can we begin? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Professor. We can surely begin.
Okay. So, by the way, I have already written to WhatsApp that coming Thursday we will have one quiz. Okay. So, how to organize this quiz, etc., etc. We'll talk about it on Monday. Is it okay, na?
Sure,
Hello.
sure.
So
Yes,
if
sir.
you have any such, I am not very experienced in conducting quiz through online process. So if you have any specific idea or experience, please share with me. Okay. So accordingly we can move on. Okay. Now let us begin where we ended. So essentially in the last class, just a kind of recapitulation little bit in the beginning itself so that you can get the right space to move forward. So we started talking about the ESR profile based on the fact of the metal complexes. So what I said so far, that in case of metal complexes, basic principles remain the same. Only the complexity develops because of variety of factors. So one of the important factors in that case, as we started talking about, the isotopic pattern, and particularly the isotopic abundances, their ratios, and their MI factor. And keeping all these things in mind, then your MI-MS interactions would become a little bit more complicated compared to the what you know about the radicals or organic molecules. So we need to understand that factors together. And on top of that, we would have the situation where the molecular distortion would come into the picture of electronic configuration. Now, when we talk about the molecular distortion, that based on the fact of the geometry of the molecules and how it is being distorted along the Cartesian axis based on the donor symmetry, donor asymmetry, chelation factor. There are so many factors, as we already aware of it from our very basic inorganic chemistry point of view. All would come into the picture together, and that would make the things much more complicated. Now, if we see the, just a second, yeah. So what we have talked about, that if you have the metal center, which is having carrying only unpaired electron, it does not have any magnetic nucleus. In that situation, it follows the super hyperfine splitting pattern under the broader banner of equivalent centers or inequivalent centers. So all would come into the picture. Already we have talked about it. And accordingly, the lines would start splitting, splitted in a very selective and designed fashion. I'm not very sure that that always you would be able to see this kind of crystal clear spectral profile. Okay, this is the ideal situation one could think about. And when you go for recording the ESR profile of your compound, you would be noticing that there are occasions you would be getting what you could anticipate out of your theoretical background. But there are many occasions you would come across where you would be encountering not so well resolved situations. We know why. Already you have talked about it. Now there is a question in the WhatsApp, I think after the last class, that doping pattern. Okay, so I'm not answering that question right now. What we will do, there is one more example I am having at the end of this, the later part of this particular talk, and there we'll discuss at length, and I hope you would be happy to understand that process. Now, we also talked about the simple situation where instead of super hyperfine splitting, we have talked about the hyperfine splitting pattern. That does mean that the same metal ion carrying the unpaired electron and carrying the nuclear spin, and then it is the vanadium 4. So one line would be splitted into 8 lines as per the standard rules, and then you will have the hyperfine constants. And there I made one point that if there is no further interactions under normal circumstances, one could expect to have a symmetric A. And symmetric A means one A can represent the rest of the A's. So you need not to worry about A1, A2, A3, etc. Only A you need to mention. But if you see that A's are not identical or similar, then you need to mention all the A's. Then if you go for a polynuclear setup, like V2 setup, what I said, and there you will have the further complications in terms of the number of lines, and based on the geometry, you will have, if you have the tetragonal symmetry over there, then you can expect to have further splitting based on the geometry. As I mentioned, the geometry, distortion, John-Taylor effect, all sort of things. And then you will have the separated segment within the spectrum, that is called parallel segment and perpendicular segment. We'll talk about it a little bit later. So all these things, but this kind of situation you should not, or you won't expect out of your organic molecules. Okay, here that the ligand is essentially very close to the free electron situation. And if it is a free electron situation, you have the interactions, that means electronic and nuclear interactions, but you won't expect to have the additional distortion in the spectral profile due to the molecular distortion, the factor which is very common for metal complexes. Now, this is the thing we started to speak about, the isotopic abundances. So I said just one particular example we have picked up, the simple copper tetracoordinated system. And if you look at the copper system, there are two isotopes and both are magnetically active. Okay, but the good point is that both having the same I value. So in both the cases, you will have 4 lines, no problem. Only the intensity of line would be proportional to the natural abundances of those isotopes. And here it is roughly 1/2. Okay, and you have been seeing that 1/2 intensity ratio between the isomers. But again, as I said, that what you can expect out of your theoretical consideration, that may not always be reflected well as far as the experimental feature is concerned. So instead of this kind of distinct spectral separation, you would be seeing a kind of overlapping. You would see it. So a kind of overlapping you would be seeing over here, and this overlapping, you see that here it is better resolved, but here slightly resolved. Here it is essentially overlapped. Here it is slightly resolved, and there you can expect to have the two A values based on the two isotopes. So you need to do some kind of Gaussian analysis to figure it out, and that can be done without much difficulty. Now the next example what we have given, which is the similar kind of example on platinum based system, where you have two isotopes, 95, 96, two isotopes. And if you see the isotopes, their ratio, their isotopes means magnetically, one is magnetically inactive isotope and one is magnetically active isotope. And this is your I equal to half. And if you look at the magnetically inactive, that means I equal to 0. So you should expect to have one line. But remember, this one line is not, it looks like the free radical line, but actually not the free radical line. I already talked it about that that if you have a very symmetrical setup around the metal centers, okay, and there won't be any additional distortion at the molecular level, so you will have one line spectrum. And if you have one line spectrum, only difference between the metal complex based or metal based one line spectrum and the organic radical based one line spectrum, that is the bandwidth. Bandwidth means the difference in magnetic field, that means in Gauss from this point to this point. For field radical case, it will be very, very sharp. Okay. But in metal complex based isotropic situation, it will be rather broad. So it is not very difficult to understand. When you start practicing it, looking at the spectrum, you may be initially a bit confused, but if you do the manipulation properly, then you would realize that you are dealing with radical or you are dealing with metal based situations. Now here, since this particular isotope, there is no I equal to 0, and here if you look at the I equal to half, and so you can expect the two lines. So basically you can consider based on the factor of the ratio by 2. Okay, that is abundance by 2. That as far as the intensity is concerned, intensity would be inversely proportional to the number of lines you are getting out of that particular isotope. Okay, so since this isotope gives you the two lines, so it will be 1 by half, and the ratio is inversely proportional. So the ratio is essentially this by this into 1 by half. Okay, and then you will be seeing, so much smaller line. And if you are lucky enough, if your situation or system means I'm talking about the molecular system, is not very cumbersome, and also your spectrometer is quite good in terms of its resolution or sensitivity, then you would be getting exactly the same ratio. The ratio what we could see over here, that would matching. So 17% with respect to the I equal to 0 line. Okay, and that you would be seeing in 17 plus 17, 34. Okay, so under that context, if you take little bit complex situation, molybdenum situation, where you will have, you see that 26% having I equal to 5 by 2 and 75% nothing. And then 5 by 2 means 6 lines. So basically 1 by 3 and 1 into 1 by 6. That means 18th. Each line intensity would be the 18 times smaller than the parent line, this one. So you could see much smaller lines compared to this one, right? Okay. So, as I said, that if your system is good enough, including the instrument, you will be getting exactly what you can expect out of your calculations. But as you know, life never goes in a linear fashion. Sometimes it is good, sometimes it is not so good. But if you are aware of, we can handle the situation in a fairly reasonable or fairly good way. Now, these examples we talked about also, and there only one good point I tried to mean, that again the same situations. So you would be getting 4 lines, and each line would be split into 3 because of the fact of the metal nitrine, that in interactions. But this example highlights the fact of the covalency, okay, beyond the point of the crystal field theory to the molecular orbital theory. This is one of the finest example. Here we end it. Now another example, if you take, this is the similar example, but the point is, as I said, that your ESR, you cannot have the linearity as far as the quality of the results are concerned. Now, if you look at the similar kind of situation of chromium 5 situation, that means D1 situation, here you have taken the porphyrin as the macrocyclic ligand around the chromium center, and the 6th coordination, naturally one solvent is there. If you record the EPR, then what will happen? You will have chromium based one line, that you will never miss it. Okay, and this one line would be further splitted into there are 4 nitrogens which are directly bonded. These are all covalent bonding. Okay, so you won't miss it. A nitrogen 100% abundance. So 2 into 4 into 1 plus 1, 9 lines, right? So the primary lines which is coming out of this chromium, that would be being splitted into 9 lines. You could see there are 9 lines are over here. One could also anticipate that chloride is also 3 by 2. Okay, but if you look at this spectrum carefully, 1 2 3 4 sorry 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. Okay, the chloride did not interact with the chromium center. Well, one could argue that why it is not so. Well, at the X band level, chloride has not been resolved. Even if you do the simulation, you won't see any further splitting because of the chloride. Chloride is 3 by 2, don't forget. There's an additional 4 lines one could expect. That does mean that the chloride distance, okay, though it is a covalent bond, but distance is slightly longer than the distance which is necessary to have the interactions at the metal electron and the nucleus spin of chloride. And indeed, if you record the crystal structure of this molecule, you will see that this metal chloride distance is slightly longer than what one could estimate out of the standard condition. And that is why it is not being reflected. But there are many occasions, and I will be also talking about that at the later part of today's talk, that how chloride could take part into the your super hypercurrent splitting profile of that compound. Okay, so but here, if we well, if you are not very careful or very enthusiastic, we would only say, unlike the previous case, that chromium other isotope, which is though 10%, which has have no impact on this spectrum. But if you are enthusiastic in understanding the spectral profile, then you will see that there is something over here and something over here. Actually, we should expect 4 lines, right? 3 by 2, na? The other isotope having I equal to 3 by 2. So 4 lines, we got it rather in a distinct fashion in the previous molecule. Here, instead of getting 4 lines, one could see 2 lines. This is 1 line, this is 1 line, somewhere here. Yeah, this is 1 line. Third and fourth could not be seen in under X band condition, but who knows? There is no data available for the Q band of this compound. So could be, if you go for Q band, you might have seen the other 2 lines. But the point of concern is, even you don't get the full thing, but the impression is very clear. Impression very clearly suggests that the other isotope is also being operational as far as the overall ESR is concerned, but in a restrictive fashion, that because of the fact of the things have gone beyond the experimental magnetic window, which is very restrictive for X band condition. So if you go for the higher machine, where the magnetic window would be spreaded further, and you could expect to have the additional 2 lines. And if you blow it, if you blow this one, okay, it's nothing visible actually. Okay, but if you blow it, you will see these 2 areas essentially look like the central one. Okay, and there you could also see the lines. Again, the argument is there is no chromium chloride interactions, and that's because of the fact of lengthening of that bond beyond the boundary conditions. Well, now it's a very simple case, like the vanadium case. Now, if you have manganese compound, particularly low spin manganese 2, so low spin manganese 2 means what is manganese? D5 S2. That means D5, and you have one unpaired electron T2G5. But if you take high spin configuration, then 5 unpaired 2. So your S equal to 5 by 2. And that's much more complex situation. So we are not talking about any complex situation right now. We're only talking about the most simple situation that S equal to half, as it is being shown over. So low spin. Okay. Now your manganese, it is known already from the literature that I equal to 5 by 2 and 100% abundance. So no way to miss it. Like copper, like your and it is octahedral compound. Okay, and as we know, all of you must be knowing by now that if you have all the ligands around the metal ions, particularly if they are monodentate, and all the ligands are identical in an octahedral environment, then you should expect to have very symmetric or ideal or close to ideal octahedral situation with the angle 90 degree, whatever it is, 180, etc., etc. And that means the distortion is essentially very minimum at the molecular level. So X, Y, and G axis, they are essentially identical, right? You cannot figure it out even from the bond unless there is your John-Taylor distortion. That is present in the copper case. We know that John-Taylor distortion is dominating if you have unpaired spin in the EG orbital, not in the T2G orbital. T2G orbital, you may have a very weak John-Taylor distortion, right? So you can have, if you have this compound, one could anticipate that you'll have a rather symmetric environment without much distortion, etc. That means the bond distances, that means manganese oxygen distance along X, Y, and G axis, they would be almost identical or very close to each other. And that is being reflected in the spectrum, and no G parallel, G perpendicular, A parallel, A perpendicular, nothing is there. But if you go to the same situation, I will talk about a little bit later on, the copper situation, or in a chromium situation if you go. Okay, copper situation if you go, your D9 configuration, right? So you will have one unpaired electron into your T2 EG levels. Okay, and if you have one unpaired electron, there are 3 electrons. So out of 2 EG levels, one would have 2 and other would have 1. The question is the one electron would be in which orbital? G square or X square minus Y square? And we know the J down, J din, all sort of consideration. And if you record the crystal structure of copper hexa co-molecule, you will see the 4 distance copper oxygen distances in the plane, they are identical. But the other 2 oxygen, along the G axis, they are identical but different than the XY plane copper oxygen distances. That means 2 set of distances you will be getting. 4, they would be identical, and 2 would be identical, but those 2 would be either smaller or greater than the other 4 set. And that means you will have your distortion along the G axis. Okay, and that would be reflected in the EPR profile. So before going, let's see the copper is there. Copper will come. So before that, this is one example that proves EPR could be also nasty. Nasty in the sense where things are not as clean as one could anticipate or expect, right? For example, this enzyme, if you look at, that cobalt is there, and naturally you could see that cobalt is linked to one X equal to halide, let us consider, or cyanide, whatever you consider. So cobalt is in the +2 state, right? So if cobalt is the +2 state, because one anion is here, one anion is here, neutral compound, +2 state, and cobalt +2, that means D7 case. Now D7 case, if you have high spin situation, then your spectrum would be very complicated. we'll discuss it later. But if you consider low spin situation, that means T2G6, Eg1. It will be very simple compound. Okay. Now, like nickel 3 compound. Okay. So it will be rather simple. But the I value is 7/2, and which is I think close to 100% abundance. So you will not miss it. But the problem is, if you record the EPR of this molecule, what do you see it that if you look at this molecule, it is octahedral molecule, and along the g-axis or one of the axes, I do not know which one would be x, which one would be y, which one would be z in the bulk. If you have the single crystal, then you can fix the axis, right? If you have the bulk, either solid or solution, it will be random. So you do not know what which corresponds to what. But the fact is, essentially, you are getting axial type of spectrum. I have not talked about axial, rhombic, etc., which we will talk later on. But accept me the fact, axial means x equal to y and z equal to not xy. That means x equal to y, not equal to z. Okay, that is bond distances or geometry along the x and y are mostly identical, not the z one. And here you see that you should expect to have the at least 7 lines plus these 4 nitrogens are there. Though they are different, but that different cannot be highlighted too much over here. So the 4 nitrogen means 9 lines. So first is 7 line and then 9 lines. So essentially, if you have one isotropic signal, that would be splitted into 7. 7/2 means 8. 8 into 9. So that means 72 lines, right? But here what is happening, that it is not isotropic situation. That means molecular distortion is there. And as a result, your situation is essentially x equal to y not equal to z. That is called axial situations. That means you will have one line followed by another line. And this one line is a composite, xy, and then g is different. And I can see it that there are some splitting over here along the xy. Splittings are there. And if you simulate it, you will also get some splitting, but not exactly what you are expecting out of this 8 into 9, 72, which is very clear. 72 is not there. Okay, but some amount of resolution is there. But in the g-axis, if you carefully look at, you would see at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 something. 8 lines are there. That means along the g-axis, okay, cobalt nuclear spin is interacting strongly with the electron spin. That's why you are getting. This is a very common situation based on the. That's why you need to have the structural parameters beforehand. And then once you have the structural parameters, and if that similar parameters sustains in solution, because you have to record the spectrum in solution to get a better resolution. Solid state will be getting the spectrum, but not so good resolution. So sometimes what happens, once you take the solid compound into the solution, some structural reorientation takes place. And that you have to establish by NMR. Of course, this will be the paramagnetic molecule, so then contrasting effect. So many issues are there. But if we assume for the time being, without going deep inside of all these molecular complexities, then we can believe that the structure is, core structure is maintained. Core structure means that X, Y, Z, the kind of difference, what we see it over here, that is there. And then a partial, interactions between these unpaired electron and this nuclear spin, which is being reflected in the g-axis, along the g-axis, and each of these 8 lines is again being splitted by this nitrogen. Okay, there are 4 nitrogen, that means 8 lines. Sorry, 4 into 1, 8 lines, right? 9 lines. These 9 lines, well, if you expand it, you will get the impression of, close to 9 lines, may not be exactly the 9 lines. But that is the instrumental, I should say limitations. But essentially, everything is being reflected in the direction of the g-axis, not in the x or y-axis, and there you could see only this, roughly 8 lines, nothing more than 8 lines. Even it could be considered a little bit lesser than 8 even, because of the lack of appropriate resolution. Now, this is one of the compounds within that, complex situation. It's, I think, very cool molecule. Cool in the sense, looks complex structurally, but electronically, very friendly molecule. Why I am saying friendly? From the perspective of EPR profile. The reason is, if you record, you must have noticed that it is your very symmetric setup. And if you look at this macrocycle, it is called porphyrin. You see one anionic nitrogen, another anionic nitrogen. So zinc is naturally in the 2. So zinc 2 means D10 system. Now, if this molecule is electroactive, EPR active, then you need to inject one electron somewhere here. Zinc, unfortunately, you know the inorganic chemistry of zinc. Zinc 2 is the only oxidation state possible. So you cannot pull the electron with D10, and you cannot pump in any electron into the d orbital of zinc because it is saturated. So if you pump in any electron over there or pull out any electron, that will happen around the macrocycle. So it would have been 2 plus, so you have injected one electron, and that electron now is being, injected into the macrocycle. And that is why this molecule is so cool. If you could have injected that electron into the metal, if it is some other metal than zinc, then it won't behave like a very decent guy. Okay, it is not. It is very decent in a human sense. As because of, that's why I said that ESR of EPR is not that bad as compared to ESR of the metal-based systems. Anyway, so if you have, if you record this EPR at room temperature in, say, dichloromethane solvent, you will be getting 9 lines. And you see the beautiful splitting of 9 lines. Okay, and the same compound, if you record at low temperature, not too low, but lower than 298 K, then you are getting total 81 lines. If you count it properly, you will be seeing 81 lines. And what is the origin of the 81 lines? Basically, what is happening, since the unpaired electron in the porphyrin area, and it's heavily conjugated, heavily conjugated, so electron density is localized all through the ring system or also the meso positions, and it is essentially localized around this situation. These 8 protons which are equivalent, now they come into the picture, and it splits into another 9 lines, so 81 lines, you get it. So I said that's why that to get a better EPR, okay, if you record this EPR of this molecule at room temperature in the solid state, you may be getting one single line. I cannot remember what it is. Maybe getting one single line with some splitting, may not be the exactly 9 lines over there. Well, that's the limitation we know already, the relaxation process, etc., Vibronic coupling, all sort of things. But if you record it in solution at low temperature, then your resolution improves because you are now taking into the glassy condition. The glassy condition where your Brownian motion is much, much more restricted, right? So the relaxation would be under control. So you should expect to have better resolution, and that is being reflected in this particular molecule. Now, this is one situation where what we are talking about so far, that tetragonal distortion. Now, let me explain it. Already you know from EPR point of view that you know the John Taylor distortion, right? And already John Taylor discussion, we know the EG is more impactful compared to T2G, and we know the reason why it is so, because none of the T2G orbitals are along the axis, and on the other hand, EG orbitals are along the axis, and the ligands in any geometry other than any geometry, they approach along the axis. So much more interactions and repulsion if you have the orbitals along the axis. That is understandable. Okay. Now, if you if you look at this molecule carefully, forget about metal oxidation state for the time being. Just concentrate on the fact of the donor centers. Like in the previous case, this is TPP actually, yeah. The porphyrin with the phenyl substituents at the meso position. This is a very standard porphyrin. Anybody can make it in the normal laboratory. I think in your one of the lab programs here, 432, I have forgotten, at the fourth year level. This synthesis we do in our lab program for the MSc students. Now, this is heavily symmetric molecules. One could expect that X, Y would be identical. And if you look at the bond parameters, though these are anionic and this is neutral, some slight difference is there, but the electron is rather symmetrically oriented over there. And the G-axis, G-axis is nothing is there, or at the best you can have some weak interaction with the solvent if you use the polar solvent. For example, if you record the spectrum in acetonitrile, indeed, in this case, they have recorded the spectrum in acetonitrile. So all of you know C triple bond N, this N can bind to the metal. And, it is not the ligand over here. It is a solvent, that's the bulk item. So some weak interactions you can expect. Okay, that you cannot prove it through the through your crystallography. This crystallography you need a single crystal, right? And it's the solution. But except techniques, if you go for, then you can probably get some feelings that whether any interaction is there or not. So let us assume for the time being some weak interaction, if at all. So that means that you will have a tetragonally elongated situation. Now, tetragonally elongated situation means here nickel 1 means essentially D9 configuration, right? D8S2. So D9 configuration. So that means 6 electrons would be at the lower part and 3 electrons would be at the T2 EG level. Now the way it is been drawn, it could have been also otherwise, that G square would be higher energy compared to XY, but it depends on many factors how the interactions are. So here it is being considered dz square at the lower than the dx. It doesn't matter much, but you have the unpaired electron in the x square minus y square, right? Now in the ESR instrument, the way it is being designed, that basically magnetic field which is parallel to the z axis, it is being considered. Now in a bulk, as I said, in the bulk you cannot think about this is x, this is y, this is z, this is average actually. But in the single crystal, one could think about it, that which axis you are dealing with. Okay, it can be fixed. Nevertheless, that since G axis is considered as the parallel axis of the applied magnetic field, then it is expected to have minimum number of ions along that directions, where there will be repulsion, right? So as a matter of fact, what will happen, the concentration of ions along the G axis or parallel axis, one axis has to be the parallel axis of the applied magnetic field, the parallel axis would be less. But if it is less, that means the maximum number of ions would be concentrated in the perpendicular region. Okay, so if this is one, so this region you will have the maximum number of ions. And as a result, ESR intensity at the perpendicular region would be maximum. And looking at this kind of spectrum, it suggests axial spectrum, where X and Y, they are almost identical, so they are together, and G is different. Okay, you know, in a bulk, as I said, instead of xy, you can change the terminology. Yeah, y, z, x. So one would be parallel and rest would be perpendicular. That is the best way to deal with the bulk sample, either solid or solution. But let us consider, you know, that G is the parallel axis. And if it is so, this pattern says here intensity is much lower than this one. That means this is the direction where the magnetic field parallel direction, and there it is expected to have a lower intensity compared to this one. This is clear, right? Now, in a another question is, this spectrum tells us very clearly that this is the Z out situation. Z out means your elongated situation. Because elongated situation, you could see it, the G square energy is low compared to x square minus y square. As a result, the axis which is parallel to the magnetic field, we have considered G square, and it appears as a lower magnetic field region. The magnetic field increases in these directions. So all are placing together. Na? You can put all these concepts and ideas together. Then you can interpret this spectral profile very nicely. Okay. And so it tells us this is the axial spectrum. It tells us this is the parallel axis. It tells us this energy would be lower as because of the fact of dj square lower over here, and dx square minus y square means the plane, okay, where you have the maximum concentration of the ions, and that intensity would be high. And now you see this called perpendicular, right? And this perpendicular line has now been splitted into, as I have written over here, 9 lines, which is very understandable because of this 9, four equivalent. If they are not equivalent, one could argue otherwise. 4 equivalent, but then you will have the multiplication of 2 ni plus 1, then 2 mi plus 1, 2 z plus 1, something like that, right? But here you have to consider only into 4 into 1 plus 1. Of course, 2 is there in the beginning. So 9 line. Now one could argue that in a symmetric molecule like this in the g-axis, there is not much splitting over here. Okay, it is nothing there, which is rather expected because the g-axis, if you consider this way, then the impact of this nitrogen in the g-axis would be very, very feeble. Now one cannot rule out that slight interaction is there or not. Slight interaction, of course, is there in the g-axis, as because of the fact this looks like slightly broader than this kind of spectrum. If you look at this broad feature of this particular parallel line, which tells us that the involvement of your super hyperfine splitting is there actually, but that cannot be resolved because of the weakness of that interactions. Okay, so now once you have a situation of multiple lines over here, then you can calculate the 9 lines mean 8a. So this gap is 1a, then this gap is 1a, this gap is another a, this gap is another a, all these things. And then you can see that whether all a's are identical or not. Mostly they are identical, okay, or very close to each other. Then you have to represent that this is the center point 1g, that is, it is being calculated here, 2.22. And here you have to consider the g at the center point. This is the central line, and the mid of the central line. Actually, one should draw a tangent over here, and where it cuts the central line, that is the point to be considered the G. But normally we don't go by that way because this is, from that angle, it is not the ideal spectrum. So what we do, the most intense central line at the midpoint, one consider for the G perpendicular. Because if you consider here and if you consider here, your G would be slightly varying at this point. Okay, so that is how it is. Now, again, this is a very simple spectrum, as we already said, just to give you an impression that what is the difference between again room temperature and your low temperature. This example we have already talked about. And now let me tell you that this example, what we said, sorry, what we said over here, the electron is essentially at the periphery of the macrocycle, right? But here, if you look at room temperature, your vanadium 1 unpaired electron with 7/2 spin, 8 lines, and it could have easily been splitted into 2 into 2 into 1 plus 1, another 5 lines. But at room temperature, nothing was observed. You see, beautiful textbook type of spectrum with your 8 lines. That means, again, it reiterates the fact of that you should not try to record the spectrum in the beginning at room temperature. Okay, we are lucky in the sense that even at room temperature, we could see the hyperfine splitting. Okay, because of this one, but super hyperfine, we cannot expect it. But if you go for the next case, again, it is the vanadium. Now, in the solution, if you record the vanadium 4, you could see that splitting pattern. Now what happens, just a second. Yeah. Now, if you take that instead of this, this compound in solution, if you take, then solution, what happened, your g-axis, if you look at, one is oxo, one is water, right? In other case, these two are oxygen, and this case is your nitrogen, right? Now, in solution, it gives us the splitting, one set of lines, what we consider as the G perpendicular, and other set of line, we consider the G parallel. Now, if you look at the G perpendicular, which is at the lower field compared to the G parallel, as because of the fact, the two issues are there, because of the fact that here you have ligand, okay, along the G axis. Not only ligand, there is a covalent, bonding with the oxygen and water, and here it is double bond. Double bond means a shorter metal ligand distance. Okay, so that gives you some kind of compressed situation. And if you have compressed situation, this is a very complex spectrum in such a sense that your G perpendicular comes at the lower field. That should be the reverse, as we already talked about from the splitting point of view. And vanadium 4 means D1, na? Okay. And this parallel would be at the lower field. But here also, if you look at this spectrum carefully, then what do we see? The nitrogen splitting is missing. It is rather surprising. In the X-band condition, I say it is rather surprising, because it's a vanadium nitrogen covalent bond. Okay, the interaction is expected to be strong enough to be reflected, but it did not happen. So nothing to feel bad about it. And this is the dichotomy of the EPR and the metal complexes. Those who would be practicing inorganic chemistry research in due course of time, any area of inorganic chemistry research, you would come across this kind of situation quite often. That I told you now, what you may anticipate something based on your all list of general concepts, and in many occasions, some occasions it will be fitting quite nicely, some occasions it won't be fitting that way. If it doesn't fit, nothing to be depressed much. Then you need to re-examine the molecular structure, distances, and you may come up with some kind of understanding. And if you fail to come up with any kind of understanding or synchronize with any kind of existing knowledge, then you need to simply say, for the sake of saving our back, that your nitrogen super happy splitting hasn't been resolved well for this set of compound. What to do? If it doesn't resolve, you cannot discover the new lines over there. Na? Only thing you can do, if it is feasible, may not be always feasible, that you can change the solvent, you can change the instrument from X band to Q band, and there you'll have some impact, but not necessarily the way you are looking for. So we have to live with that kind of limitation. Every spectroscopy is nothing new in EPR. Okay, even NMR is such a wonderful, such a powerful technique for molecular structure characterization. But from inorganic point of view, many occasions, it frustrates us. Okay, so many overlapping, crowding. Okay, so something we could see, something we failed to see, but everybody understands this is the reality. So ideal situation and real situation, as far as the spectroscopy is concerned, like any other situation, similar way they are operational. So we need to first have your compound. I'm repeatedly mentioning the same thing. We need to have your new compound, and you have to characterize the compound, that the particularly the crystal structures and other spectroscopic techniques which are necessary, or analytical technique. What is the composition? What is the molecular structure? What is the oxidation state of the metal ions? And so on and so forth. And once you have that thing, if it is a paramagnetic, record the ESR and see the results. And you, while using the spectrum, try to apply the best possible scenario around you. That means temperature, low temperature, that means your solvent, all sort of things, and the instruments is in a perfect condition, and record it. Whatever you will be getting on a piece of paper like this, and then you try to interpret it. And for that, you go for simulation. And if you see the simulation is also behaving like this, that means there are certain hidden reasons which are beyond of our common understanding why the super hyperpine is not being reflected over here. So that is how one should proceed on. Now in the copper case, for example, you look at this case we discussed earlier. Yeah. Now if you look at this copper tetracoordinated copper situation, what do we see? We see a simple 4-line spectrum. Okay, but ideally, if you consider this molecule, it is tetragonally elongated molecule. That means even solvent, if it is there, solvent is away from the metal field. That's why there is no covalent linkage. So, weak linkage may or may not be there. Okay, so you are getting 4 lines, but no further splitting due to the molecule. That means parallel domain or perpendicular domain, what you anticipate that is not being reflected. But if you go for this molecule, and then you will see the difference. Yeah. Yeah. You see, this is one simple copper perchlorate. Copper perchlorate, if you take in water, you understand. In a solvent, if you take it, then it will be surrounded by the solvent, and perchlorate will balance the charge for copper 2. So D1 system. So D9 system essentially. So D9 system, 1 ampere electron. So if 1 ampere electron is there, and if the elongation is there, then what will happen? You will have G, as already I have talked about in nickel. You see the G parallel region at the low magnetic field region, and G perpendicular at the high magnetic field region. Now, if you look at this spectrum a little bit carefully, unlike in the previous case of nickel, okay, nickel case, if you look at, nickel case, there is no splitting at the G parallel site. Why there is no splitting? I said, answer is, the splitting you should expect through the donor center. Nickel does not have any nuclear spin. Okay, effective nuclear spin. So any splitting of line, what you are getting over here, along the X and Y axis, that is due to the equivalent 4 nitrogen centers. So that is called super hyperpine splitting, right? But along the g-axis, it is not being properly reflected because of the weak or no interaction, as because of the fact of there is no nitrogen's probably away from the, it's a 90-degree away from the g-axis. But in case of this example, if we take, here we are getting 4 lines, and these 4 lines, these are not super hyperfine. They are essentially hyperfine of copper. So if you have one copper spectrum, so you will never miss the hyperfine, because that is the closest distance one could think about. That electron is associated with that metal, and the same metal is having the nuclear situation. So that interaction one cannot, you can miss that surrounding interactions because of variety of factors, but the same won't be missed, right? So if you have unpaired electron on nitrogen 14, you never miss that triplet line with I equal to 1 over there, the same nucleus. So it will not be splitted. Now the G parallel region, this kind of situation again you may come across, that you should expect 4 lines, but you cannot recognize the 4 lines as you could for the G parallel region, but you are getting impressions, right? You are getting impression. In EPL life, we need to live with impression in many occasions. That impression is today may be rainy day or very sunny day, may not be actually sunny. In the morning, you may get some impression that today rain may come, or today it will be very sunny or very cold, whatever it is. Eventually, it may not. Okay, so similarly over here in EPR, quite often you need to live with the impression, but if you improve the conditions in terms of solvent, in terms of temperature, instead of say 77K, if you move down to 4K, if you have that much of money in pocket, because you need a lot of money for liquid helium. Very few places in India, they do have the liquid. Fortunately, we have at IIT Bombay. So, or if you move from X to Q, then you may have the better resolution at the perpendicular level even. Okay, but remember that if you have this kind of situation, then I have not mentioned over here, but you have to be very careful. You have to mention G parallel and A parallel also. A parallel and G perpendicular / A perpendicular. This is the convention. Always you have to follow that. Now, again, the same example for the same compound. Earlier, I have given 2 different examples. Now, if you look at, this is the case we have already talked about. Okay, and here you see it, the isotopic pattern has not been resolved properly, as because of the fact that your experimental operation was not so perfect like in the previous case, though the same compound. Okay, now here what you see it, that 4 lines, but if you go down to 77K, you look at, it has been resolved. Okay, but it's a reverse situation. Reverse situation means the G parallel region has been resolved, but not in a full sense, partial sense. But this region rather resolved in a better way. So 1, 2, 3, and here 1, 2, 3, 4 lines has been resolved in a better way. So all sort of varies. I'm giving the impression that there is nothing linear. Okay, you may have the non-linearity. That means the deviation from the ideal situation. But if you come across that kind of situation, don't consider your all results are false or all results are not that good. No, not really. Okay, this is a fact. So you have to deal with the live with the fact. Now let us come back to one very unique example. Now, before going into that unique example, let me speak about the 1 minute or couple of minutes about one issue that very commonly we deal with in the inorganic chemistry mode particularly, that the type of ligands. Now, if you look at the ligand scenario, ligand means mostly organic molecules from the chelated point of view. And if you consider the monodentate ligand, they're mostly inorganic in nature, right? Like water, cyanide, nitrosyl, and so on and so forth. But chelated, they are mostly organic in nature. And most of the ligand, chelated one, they do not participate in the redox processes. That means they have either neutral in nature or monoanionic or dianionic, something like that in a say bidentate, if I consider bidentate. For example, if you take ethylene diamine, that is neutral ligand, right? If you take acetyl acetonate, for example, this one, bidentate but mononegative, right? And they have only one redox states. But if you look at the main group elements, they are mostly the two oxidation state, 1, 3, something like that. Okay, or 3, 5, or 2, 4, something like that. But in transition metals, you must have seen or remembered that it's called the variable valence pervades the transition metals chemistry. That means the beauty of transition metal chemistry from biological point of view, from catalysis point of view, from industrial point of view, that essentially control or govern by the fact of its variability in terms of oxidation state consideration, right? For example, there are metal ions where you can take -2 to +8, 9. All in between, all the oxidation states are available, or people have access to all the oxidation state, depending on the different coordination situation, different ligand situation, and so on and so forth. Okay, but only a set of ligands, very few ligands, they can they can be stabilized in more than one redox states or oxidation states under a particular coordination system. For example, if I give one example, you will immediately understand that molecular oxygen. If you take molecular oxygen, which is neutral, right? But if you pump in one electron in the molecular oxygen at the LUMO, then you will have superoxo, right? O2 dot minus, which is a biologically very relevant item, superoxo. Or if you add one more electron there, then you will be ended up to peroxo, right? That means oxygen can be stabilized into 0, -1, and 2, -1. Similarly, if you take nitrosyl molecule NO, which could be neutral, which could be negative, which could be positive, all sorts of that is more than one oxidation state possible. Now, one such kind of ligand is quinone. All of you know quinone. Quinone is biologically very relevant items. For example, if you look at your skin, the skin, melanine, it is there, na? That is basically paraquinone is there. Okay, so it undergoes oxidation reductions, all sort of things. Now, if we start the cis-quinone instead of paraquinone, orthoquinone, say we can think about it is oxygen, that is called dioxylene. We can consider NH group here, that means diimine, or we can consider sulfur, dithiol. Okay. Now, if it is a neutral form, that means fully oxidized form, it can undergo successive electron transfer, electron uptake process. You can look at the plus electron. This is reversible process. It can goes to the dianionic state, which is in case of oxygen, sulfur, nitrogen, we call the catecholate state. And in between, one monoanionic state that is called semiquinone state. Okay. Now, how do you understand this thing? That this molecule in a metal, in a free ligand, you cannot understand that much. It will be irreversible, basically. So, but if you put a metal, that means the metal will be bonded through XY over here. it will give you essentially 5-member chelate, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-member chelate. Okay, a very stable chelate it will give you. And there, if you isolate that compound, crystallize that molecule, and record their crystal structure, then you will see the distinct variations of bond parameters as a function of the redox state of that ligand. Okay, just one example I have taken over here for your better understanding. If you consider OO, X equal to O, if you look at if it is in the oxidized state, that means quinone, cis-quinone or orthoquinone, the CO bond distance, both are equivalent. Na? CO bond distance is 1.22. If you consider that minus, that means 2 electron reduced state, it will become now single bond 1.34. And the intermediate would be 1.30. So there is no way to miss it. The distinct change in bond parameters as a function of the redox of that ligand system. If you take X equal to NH, you look at 1.3, 1.35, 1.38. If you consider sulfur, then it comes into 1.69, 1.72, 1.75. So you will see it very nicely. Now you understood now what I'm trying to mean. These won't be reflected so sequentially if you take free ligand, because their electron uptake or electron releasing matter is irreversible. But as soon as you allow this kind of ligands to bind to the metal to form one chelate system over there, and then these active bond parameters would vary significantly depending on the redox state. And this is, people have tested thousands of compounds of this ligand with a different metal center, different ancillary ligand, different co-ligands. And based on that, this general table could be developed. So I'm trying to extend the message to you that these kind of ligands is called redox active ligand, and they have their own implications in inorganic chemistry, in catalysis, in biology, and all sort of issues are there. So we are not going into that issue. We are taking one example based on that understanding. Just one example. Now, if you look at this molecule looks a little bit complex in nature, but if you try to understand, it's a very simple molecule that there are 2 ligands in the molecule. One is, ferrocene based diphosphine ligand, which is naturally neutral ligand. There is no charge over here. And because this charge is being balanced by the iron 2. And this ligand, as you look at the code structure over here, is this, right? OCC. That means it is essentially this code structure. But this code structure having extended phenanthrene backbone. Okay. Now this molecule, how to define it? Now here it could be electronic structure, because this ligand is absolutely inert. This is a common ligand where there is no change in oxidation state of the ligand. But if we consider this ligand, so we have the following consideration, right? Neutral consideration, dianionic consideration, and monoanionic radical consideration. Now, if I consider these 2 are neutral, right? Then if there is no just one charge outside, BF4 minus one, that means this molecule is plus. That means if it is a neutral, copper has to be copper 1, and BF4 would be the balancing charge. On the other hand, if you consider this is anionic, dianionic, that means under these circumstances, then copper would be copper 3. Copper 3 and 2 minus over here and 1 outside minus. On the other hand, if you consider the intermediate radical state, then copper would be copper 2. copper 2 radical minus anionic radical, and 1 minus over here. So there are 3 possible electronic structural form at the interface of copper and quinone, right? But the X-ray structure, if you have the crystal structure of this molecule, you will see that C double bond O bond distance is 1.2. And that is why I showed this table. Okay. Then X equal to oxygen, 1.2 corresponds to the doubly oxidized quinone form, right? So it suggests the fact from these metric parameters through the crystal structure that this molecule is in neutral. If it is in neutral, that means it is oxidized, doubly oxidized quinone state, and your one anion is a charge balancing counter anion. So this molecule is NMR active. With copper 1, D10, it gives beautiful NMR as per the molecular structure. No problem. But if you reduce this molecule by 1 electron, either electrochemically or chemically, you are trying to reduce this molecule by 1 electron. Now, next question is, which constituents of this molecule is in a position to take up that electron? That is the inorganic questions we have in hand now. Now, all of you know that this molecule, as I said, that this molecule having one oxidation state, the ligand, which cannot take any electron or which cannot release any electron. Now, copper 1, which can easily release 1 electron to go to the copper 2. But here you see the plus sign. That means we are not allowing to release the electron. We are rather pumping the electron into the system. But copper 1, is it in a position to accept the electron? Answer is no. Because copper 0, no way to stabilize under this ligand environment. If you take all 4 phosphine, I do accept the fact of copper 0 is possible under phosphine environment, which is very strong accepted ligand. Okay. So one has to understand chemistry before doing the spectroscopy. That I wanted to mean through this particular example. So which constituent then can take up the electron? Naturally, the oxidized quinone, and that is why I showed that if it is in an oxidized form, it can take up 2 electrons. Okay, but we have not allowed 2 electrons into the system. We have allowed only 1 electron into the system. So it will be then radical. So unpaired electron is here. Do not forget, unpaired electron is here, just like it is here. So this is the configuration. So that we could establish by crystal structure and other thing by following these carbon-oxygen bond parameters. Now, if you record the EPR of this molecule, because here you have 1 unpaired electron, so it is EPR active molecule. Okay, NMR inactive molecule. You will be getting NMR but parametrically shifted, very complex NMR. So the EPR shows this kind of profile. Okay, beautiful profile. And if you see the EPR total line, which is 108. Now, how to interpret the fact of the experimentally observed 101 line? That is the question. Okay. Now, there are different ways one could think about. Now, this electron, if it is here, it is naturally directly linked to the copper center. And copper having I equal to 3/2. So it will give you 4 lines. Am I clear? And then this copper is also linked to the 2 phosphorus, and each phosphorus having half, and they are equivalent phosphorus. That means this electron is being diffused to copper, and then it is being diffused to these 2 equivalent phosphine centers. So that means 2 into 3/2 plus 1, then 2 into, as per our formula, 2 into half phosphorus I value is half plus 1. So total 12 lines. And indeed, if you calculate it, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines are there. Now there are two options because each line, the primary 12 lines, each of the 12 lines, you do see they are being splitted further, right? Now, if you carefully look at, then there are two options out there. One option is you can think about that this electron is because this particular chelate which is connected to these three fused rings. They are fused rings, right? Phenanthine. So fused rings means electron density is diffused among all the things. But if we wish to be a little bit partial and little bit wrong, then we could imagine that only these 4 electrons are being participating over there because of the symmetry along this copper, carbon, carbon, iron axis. If we consider one axis over here, then we can consider the half of the molecule. But here we have noticed that half is not existing, the full is existing. That means these 4, if we consider, it will be 5. 5 into 12, 60. And that is not likely situation, as because of the fact that we have already seen that these two phosphine, they are collectively participating, not the half of this phosphine, right? Then we have no reason to believe that only one ring, based on the consideration of the half symmetry, would be participating in further interactions. Essentially, this electron is delocalized through the whole ring chapter to the copper to phosphine. That's all. It doesn't go beyond that. And so eight protons are there. So 8 protons means 9 lines. So 9 into 12, you will have 8 lines. And that is being reflected. That means there are 12 lines. This is the baseline which are being originated out of that quinone, semiquinone electron interaction with the copper nucleus spin 3/2, followed by 2 equivalent phosphine nucleus spin half interaction that gives you total 12 lines. Then 8 peripheral protons associated with the phenanthine system linked to the semiquinone directly in a very conjugation and fused fashion. All 9 protons are being involved. So that splits each line into further 9 lines. So total we are getting 108 lines. Okay. So understand this thing. And that's called redox active or redox non-innocent ligand in a metal complex, which makes the EPS spectrum to some extent complex, but more interesting, okay, and challenging also. Now,
Hello, sir.
yeah, hello.
Sir, copper 63 and copper 65 both have 3/2. I is equal to 3/2.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
should
yeah.
it should give different A
It
value
should.
also there.
And EPR always should, but should may come forward, might not be coming forward. For example, that's why I have been given and telling again and again that whatever ideally you could think about, that may not be reflected all the time properly. So if it reflects, we have to interpret. If it doesn't reflect, we need not to. I have given this example over here. Okay, so there is only one isotope is being reflected. But I have given another example in the beginning where both could be. Both could be. Okay. So if you get it, it depends on various factors. Ideally, it should be. But practically, what you are getting, you have to interpret it. Okay. So if it is the copper, the other isomer which is being reflected over here, then you would have got a different kind of spectral profile. Okay. So that's why again and again I am repeating or iterating to you that look at the spectrum first and see how best. It requires a lot of practices. That how best one could interpret it. Okay, there are occasions you may not interpret in a proper fashion, but you can then mention all the probabilities. Okay, so but here it is very crystal clear. In the copper case, my general perception is that the two isotopes won't reflect very easily. There are only very selective compounds where you could see that two isotopes, impact. In a general sense, one isotope prominence, prominent isotope mostly react, or it gets buried inside that, which doesn't come out of that original spectrum, original line. If it comes out, well and good. If it doesn't come out, fine, forget it. Okay. Well, now this is the example already we have talked about, but one point that time we did not mention, which is very important. You could remember that this example we talked about, I think, last day. Yeah, this is the example. But that time deliberately I kept quiet for one issue, which I thought to highlight separately. Yeah. So here, if you look at this one molybdenum compound, if you look at the octa coordinated, that means we know the dodecahedron symmetry, all we know it, right? Okay. This is a very symmetric type of situations it is. Now, molybdenum, we know that, there are many molybdenum compounds, you'll be missing all these lines. But this is some selective compounds we have picked up to help you to understand the situation. That's why I'm saying the real situation, these are all artificially I have picked up that things from the literature. But there are so many compounds of molybdenum 5 where no question of all these hyperfine, all sort of things. That is also there. But anyway, better to live with the positive sense. If positivity is not that high, fine, we would live with that only. Now, in this case, molybdenum 5, again, I already said earlier that these are the two isotopes which constitute essentially 75% and no magnetic isotope is equal to 0. But other two isotopes, 95, 97, total, constitute around 25%, roughly 25% are equal to 5/2. And that's why, as I said, that intensity of the lines is inversely proportional to the number of lines, right? So 1/6, 1/3, 1/18, already I have explained it. Now, if you look at this spectrum little bit critically, then you would see it requires, your brighter eyes actually. Yeah. So you would be seeing the two spikes over here, in both the directions of the main line, there are two spikes. Okay, if we expand the spectrum, unfortunately, I cannot change it now. Then you will be seeing it is not, it is dominating. Two spikes, very small intensity, and you cannot. You only understood that it is not. It is not, negligible. Something is there. Whether I understand or not, that's a separate issue. But something is there. So one could try to understand it, and then a lot of simulations, etc., people have done. What people realized that these two lines essentially originating out of the fact of carbon C13. Now, if you look at this molecule very carefully, one of the axes could represent the molecule. Then any axis if you take is octacyanide. That means along the axis, you have two cyanides, right? And half. So that actually the interaction between the molybdenum one electron over here and that carbon 13, which gives you the two lines. Now that tells you the another question. That cyanide, it can be linked to the metal with the carbon, but alternately isocyanide. It can be linked to the nitrogen center. So there are two options. If it would have linked to the nitrogen center, then your number of lines would be more rather than the way it is being right now linked to the carbon center. So that's why it is only 2. But if it is N, then you have to consider more number of lines, okay, and intense line. Where nitrogen, your 100% abundance, and carbon, it is just 1.1% abundance. Carbon 13, not carbon 12. So carbon 12, nothing, no I. So that is being reflected, and that again tells you the story that metal ligand overlapping. Otherwise, that crystal field deficiency, ligand fields appearance, all sort of stories could be explained very, very nicely by EPR technique. And here it is very clear that if it would have been nitrogen-based isocyanide, then one should expect to have much bigger lines, more lines, much bigger lines, because I equal to 1 for nitrogen 14. And the second factor is the carbon bonded. And third factor is that covalency, which could be established through this exam. Now, what time it is, please? Because you have a class, na? Should I stop it now or should I extend it? What should I do? Hello? 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 You have a class now? Hello?
Yes, sir, we have a class at
Oh, okay, I'm stopping it now. So next day again. Wish you all the best. Okay.
thank you, sir.
Okay, bye.